excited to welcome Luke Jordan. I immediately felt a very sweet connection with him, just really close brothers. So Luke first went to Mysore, India to study in 2001, and he has a master's in religion. And just correct me, Luke, if I'm getting any of this mucked up. He's been chanting for some time. I'm going to ask him a little bit about that. And he brilliantly runs the Ashtanga Yoga Summer School. I think it's such a clever and amazing idea. Right now he's currently in Portugal. And so he's been doing for how many years? 2-3 years now?
No, I think it's now, I think this would be the 6th year.
Oh, wow.
First time I did it was in Holland. And in a little room we affectionately named the dungeon, because it was like a really small room, and every day we tried to set the record for squeezing new people into it. So
yeah,
I think the record still stands. I think it was hell on earth for people.
Right. But he has a really great, brilliant program that he does that every year, and it's been, I guess, a little bit harder this year because of the situation, but hopefully make.
Well, it looks like I've got the go ahead for it, so the space is there. But what's going to be different is there can only be a certain number of people in the room at one time. So I think you can still do a Mysore class, but it's going to be like a maximum of 10 people at one time. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. So anyways, I just want to thank you, Luke, for joining us. I'm sorry I didn't do my proper oblations before we get this thing kicked off.
Completely unnecessary.
You're trying to step on my honorifics. Anyways, he's really sweet and very intelligent. I really appreciated his humor and fun through the years. A good friend of mine, and Luke Jordan. So first I want to start off, I want to know what is yoga? What do you define as yoga?
It's funny you said that, because in the waiting period I was thinking to myself, what is yoga? And I was thinking about all the different definitions that are out there, and it seems to change in every given moment what yoga is. So some days, I'm doing practice. There's one thing that's really clear for me, and that is yoga is not any form of practice. Yoga is a state, and it's a state of abiding in, well, theoretically, it's a state where we're abiding in something that we might call our true self, which is beyond all of the everyday notions of who we think we are and all of that personality stuff that we put out there in order to impress other people or to get people to like us. All of the techniques and devices that we have. So I would say yoga is something beyond that it touches a core of our being that we know, and that we know is me or is you. And most of the time we're not doing that. Most of the time we're pretending to be something else in order to fit in.
Okay, well, I have to come and just this confusing me, because you're saying that it's not a practice, right? Is what you started off by saying.
I would say definitely yoga is not a practice.
Okay,
at least from my philosophical perspective. I'm not saying.
So the definition in the Gita, the skill in action, is not.
Oh yes.
Is not.
So the skill in action. That is
yoga. That point is what you're.
That, you see, the skill in action is a byproduct of being in yoga, as far as I understand the Gita. It's not yoga itself, it is the byproduct from being in the state of yoga, what Krishna calls, I think in that same verse, he calls buddhi yukta. So what buddhi yukta is the real yoga, and the skill in action is the byproduct. And buddhi yukta is very interesting, because there in Samkhya philosophy you have the evolutes of prakriti. Mm-hmm. And the way I like to think of it is this. And in the beginning is Om, just like St. John says, in the beginning is the word, right? And except in yoga they would say the word was Om. And then from that word, or from Om, comes I. And this is what I would say buddhi is. It's just this complete, unadulterated I-ness that is pure intelligence. And then at some point after that, this I becomes I am, which is ahamkara. And already there is the delusion, because where you have I am, you have also the possibility of I am not. And therein begins the insecurity. Because after that, then we come into I am Luke, I am a yoga teacher, I am an Ashtanga yoga practitioner. All of these things, which essentially what they do is they cover up this insecurity that I may not be at some point. At least that's my understanding of the philosophy. So right. For me, yoga is more buddhi yukta, is that maintenance of, it's tatra sthitao yatna abhyasa. So it's like the abhyasa is that abiding, is the practice of staying in the state where you're not afflicted by the chittavrittis.
But be there, Luke, it takes effort. It takes yatna, right? So that is a practice for most humans like myself.
That's a really good point. I'm glad, and it's a good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because my understanding of it is that it's a practice of non-practice. That what it is, it's a remembrance, it's an awareness rather than something that you actually do. All of the doing is a movement away from that. All this idea that I am somebody who can do something in order to facilitate my liberation is a movement away from that beingness that you are already. That's, how I understand the philosophy. So interestingly enough, when we come to Yoganga Anustanada Sudikshaye Jnana Diptira Viveka Kyatehe in the second chapter, it potentially is pretty clear that this is a via negativa. It's yoga is what's there when you take everything off. It's like when you take off all of your layers of identity, when you take off your clothes, when you finally stand naked, that's yoga. And you don't need to get your legs behind your head in order to do that.
We can change our bodies like clothes too. Right?
Well,
that's what Krishna says.
According to Krishna.
Yeah. Okay.
But of course, the question is then, who is the we who changes the body? Because that would immediately give you the sense that there is an I as a personality, maybe as a soul, who goes around switching bodies. And I would be hesitant to project that notion of an I onto that particular mechanism.
So, okay. And I'm going way off the rails here already.
I think that's better. I had a look at the questions. John had already let me party to all of the questions that he was going to ask, and I had a look at them, and I thought, you know what, it'd just be nice to have a conversation.
Yeah. So I'm thinking in terms of this idea of the yatna, this effort idea, and then in the second chapter, he kind of alludes to this. An easier way is maybe to become, in this Ishvara Pranidhana kind of vehicle. as far as I can tell,
But it's interesting that you bring up Ishvara.
like the only
Yes.
one that's outside of that realm of action is
See, I think Patanjali's notion of Ishvara is completely misunderstood, because the Purusha Vishesha, the special Purusha that he's talking about, is completely independent from ever having had any relationship with Prakriti whatsoever. So this notion that somehow Ishvara gets involved in the world and will wake people up, according to Patanjali, I think that's a misunderstanding about what Patanjali is actually saying. I think Ishvara is more than anything an object of meditation. This idea of a completely empty Purusha, because that's the closest thing to the drashtavu, to the seer, is that complete emptiness. And of course, then he does give a practice, which is Om, to repeat and meditate Om.
Although he doesn't say
Om. Well, he calls it the pranava, which is generally understood as Om. But
he could have said Om, because Om was probably in the vernacular at the time.
Probably, but in Sanskrit they like to just make everything more difficult. It's like they came up with all these sandy rules. It's just a barrier so that the plebs don't start learning it. It's because it's an incredibly, like, the Vedic religion is incredibly hierarchical. In order to do any of the yajnas, you needed to have a lot of money. So you could almost say it was a conspiracy between the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins to keep themselves separate and above the rest of society. And I was reflecting upon that, like looking at the stories.
Well, in the Buddhists, the renunciates are in a whole other, argumentative point of view, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but I think Buddhism, the only way Buddhism is different is politically. Because what Buddhism does is it says, look, we reject this social system, this hierarchical social system.
Yeah. So
then they create their own. Then they create their own one.
Yeah, right. It's almost inherent where two or more are gathered. You're gonna have.
We're gonna have a hierarchy. Exactly.
Okay, I want to know what your thoughts are, since you've studied quite a bit of the Yoga Sutra. There's a recent resurgence of you typically seem to view it as coming from a Samkhya point of view. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I don't think there's I think the difference between Samkhya and yoga, I would say absolutely yoga is a form of Samkhya. And this is, I make the same distinction that Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the difference is that yoga is just Samkhya in practice.
Okay.
So Samkhya is it's unpeeling the evolutes of materiality, of material nature, to come to an understanding of who you really are. And then yoga is acting from that place, what Krishna calls karma yoga, is acting in the state of buddhi yoga. And Krishna even says in the Bhagavad Gita, because historically at that time, there was the development of different schools. So the Samkhya school and the yoga school, they were kind of veering off from each other. So at the time that Krishna was speaking, he was saying, the idiots say that Samkhya and yoga are two. And he says they're not two. And currently academically, there is no acceptance of yoga as being a form of Samkhya. And that is because the philosophical conclusions of Samkhya are abhorrent to practitioners of yoga. Mm-hmm. And that's why I gather they have separated the two, or rather people can't. There's very, very few scholars will accept them as being together, and I don't think it's because they're right. I think it's because they just can't accept the consequences, philosophically speaking.
I think there's also a resurgence of thinking that, or not resurgence, there's some theories that it's more of a Buddhist text because of the similarities, like the four immeasurables, which also appear in the Bhagavad Gita and other places. But there's the language also is similar. So what are your thoughts on that, about it being
I think that,
why I'm asking this, because I think what hat or what sort of philosophical viewpoint we're wearing when we're interpreting these texts is very important. And for you to say,
yes,
as many have, that it's from a Samkhya point of view, and that has like all of these tanmatras and all of the, like it's breaking apart, dividing to conquer, sort of, so to speak, is an interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because historically, all of these philosophical schools, they grew up kind of in the same backyard, and they were all part of the same gang. So in the Upanishads, you find the roots of Samkhya, you find the roots of yoga, you find the roots of Vedanta, and even arguably, I would say, the roots of Buddhism as well. And they all share basic concepts. And then later, as they get older, they want to have their own identity, so they kind of form different schools. But meanwhile, the way I see it is the texts are they're like the icing on the cake. They're the final representation of the discussions that are happening on the historical ground, and everything's borrowing from everything else. So, in
it was an oral tradition, so they were probably cropping certain words here and there and kind of trimming it down.
Well, also together with religion is politics and popularity. So any religion, it's like how the Yoga Sutras became popular, right? It was Vivekananda went over to America he had rediscovered the Yoga Sutras, which had been a dormant text. The tradition of yoga wasn't a living tradition anymore. So he fished out this text that he, gathered from the Theosophists. And all of a sudden, it's a big hit in the States. Vivekananda's a big hit. Now everybody wants a piece of yoga. Because it works. It's like being in Mysore, right? What's the most popular dosa restaurant? Mailari, right? So good.
But you and I know GPR is better.
Exactly. But the Mailari, it got so popular that somebody opened up a restaurant and said, "Look, we'll just open it up and call it Mailari."
And then there's a second one.
Then there's a second one. So the same thing happens, from my understanding, the same thing happens in religion. Something works, something gets popular. Yeah, we'll take that idea. We'll take that idea. We'll take that idea.
Yeah.
So I think you're right that the Yoga Sutras is a conglomeration of different philosophical schools, but I would say at its heart is the inseparable understanding of Samkhya. But
I want to get into that, but I want to first know why you started. What got you interested in yoga? I want to know a little bit about you and your own personal.
Well, it's tough to say, isn't it? Because all that we really have are stories to make sense of reality that we don't understand. And we're all born with certain interests and proclivities and what have you, and we don't know where they come from, essentially. And I was reflecting on this because I was thinking about it, and I remember being in school and being given a Bible and kind of having an interest about it, but kind of, it was like a shameful interest, like it was something I had to hide away because I think it was because my family didn't really have any truck with the church whatsoever. They had no interest in that. They were good.
Yeah, I think probably coming from Ireland, there was probably was there a dissent there just because of all of the fighting? There were a lot of people just tired of that.
It's pretty hard. Where I grew up, Northern Ireland, pretty much your identity is assured as being one side or the other. And even people who aren't religious, they'll still go to church, they'll still get their children baptized in the church, because it's like you have to belong. The same thing happens in every religion, in Hinduism, except even worse, right? It's like the caste of a caste of a caste of a caste.
Yeah.
And I guess the story goes like this, which is, I guess one time I must have been like, well, no, actually, I was, the first time I got interested in it, I was given a book when I was about 13 by one of the Hare Krishnas who was trying to
Yeah, me too.
me.
I read your little thing, and I got one of those at the airport as well, about the same age.
Yeah, and it just made sense. It's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's all these people around me are living on a material level, and then there's an intellectual level, and then it's talking about, there's a spiritual level. And so, of course, I wanted immediately to aspire to the spiritual level, because that was the highest. Because if you're at the spiritual, you're better than everybody else, right?
I can make this a little easier. When did you do your first Surya Namaskar, and how did it make you feel, or do you remember?
I do remember. It was I was doing my finals at university, and I went into the room and sat down, getting ready for my first class, and it was like a beginner's course. And the teacher at the time, like nobody'd done any yoga before going into this room. He's sitting there in lotus, and he lifts himself up into handstand. Thinking, that's pretty cool. I want to be able to do that.
This was at university.
This is a university. This is my last
another one.
Last year.
Wow.
But before that, I would say it's probably the Beatles got me into yoga.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
music, and once you've smoked a certain herbal cigarette and you start listening to those lyrics, it's like, wow, they make sense.
Yeah. They can make sense without that too.
That's true. Listening back now, I hear that, but
yeah,
that was what opened my ears back in those days.
Okay, here's a whammy. Do you think moksha is possible?
For me and for you, absolutely not.
I agree with you.
I think for anybody who wants moksha, it's not possible. Because the very one that wants moksha has to disappear in order for there to be moksha. And so it's moksha is a paradox. It's like a carrot that the spiritual people hold in front of our faces in order for us to keep doing their practices, or keep taking our money, No, I don't.
I often think, Luke, here's the problem I have sometimes is I fear that there's going to be this, if I submerged myself into this giving bliss state, that I almost, again, it's a belief, this grasping onto this belief, that I would literally probably get locked up. So I think part of me lives in fear of going outside of this norm, whatever that norm is. So I'm constraining myself to like a prison cell almost, in a way, because I can't just totally, like, if I started throwing like $20,000 at people, everyone would think I'm crazy. Not that I have that much, but if I was just like everything I got, and I was just,
well, you see, you
live in a bliss realm.
We have an idea about what moksha is, and well, my idea about what moksha is that it's nothing that you could think. And so, of course, there's going to be a fear about what happens if we let go of our restraints. And the fact of the matter is we just don't know.
Yeah.
And we don't know if anybody else is in moksha, because for certain the people who say they've attained moksha haven't.
Yeah.
you know.
So I've attained it for sure. What do you define as satya? And since you're talking about grasping onto ideas, what do you think about satyagraha? Like, are there things to grasp that are good ideas or good things to grasp, like a state of yoga or like liberation or moksha?
I think, John, that's all we have. All we have are ideas to grasp onto, and because we live in a sea of, being buffeted about endlessly by waves that are beyond our conception. We can't understand what this thing called reality is, and so because of that, all that we have left are concepts, or all that our rational minds have left to hold on to are concepts. And actually, I think the practice is a little bit like this as well. It's kind of like a lifeboat in this interminable sea, which gives us a sense of, gives us an illusory sense that we can navigate our way around, when in actual fact is we are at the complete whim of the waves that surround us.
Yeah,
that would be my impression.
Yeah, you're making me think of that metaphor of, the Buddha taking the lifeboat across the river and then leaving it there, like the analogy of him. He doesn't care, he's not carrying around this lifeboat or the tools that
and I think, to take that metaphor further, I think he's saying, get out, you get used to being in the boat, and he's saying, okay, you've got to get out to get to the other side. But it's not like you've arrived at some tropical island where there's still waters and you can, no. It's, you've got to surrender to the waves.
Where you are the waves. I guess that's
that's the the illusion of separation, is thinking that somehow this particular waveform is separate from the entire ocean.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask one that my student asked. So what attracted you to Taoism? Like, what
Taoism?
In Taoism?
It was just the first one I came across.
Yeah.
Well, apart from the book that the Krishnas gave me, it was the first one that I came across. It was I was seeing a counselor at the time. He recommended me that I did some qigong, and I started doing qigong. And just whenever I get into something, I kind of like to really get into it, like buy all the books and read them all. So the first book that I got, I'd say after the little Krishna book, was probably the Tao Te Ching. No, not the Tao Te Ching, the Tao of Pooh, which led me to the thing. I think the Tao of Pooh is a phenomenal book.
I know. I never read that one.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But for me, the picture of the Taoist sage is the same as the picture of the yogi. Somebody who's flowing harmoniously with what is. His own nature is aligned with what is, and he flows with it. Like water. That's the typical image of the Taoist sage.
How does one recognize that? Because my thing is like, I guess, it seems like you wouldn't even be able to see that state if you were there.
Exactly.
The reflective state, it's like a pre-reflective.
You see, you would have nothing to hold on to.
Yeah.
And life would just be happening. And you wouldn't be saying to anybody, look, I've got control over life. Look at how life flows for me, because it would just be flowing. So in a way, there's nothing to be had.
Yeah.
And this is one of the problems for me with yoga, is that everybody's trying to attain something. You know, whether spiritual enlightenment or whether it's a better posture or whatever. And for me, this philosophical spirit of yoga is the abidance in non-attainment, which is what Krishna's telling Arjuna.
But still acting.
Well, you see, he says you can't help it but act.
Right.
You know, because at one point you're going to get hungry. Right? So you got to go out and...
Or want to breathe.
Exactly, right? So you can't not act, says Krishna. But we're also in danger of, you see, taking the whole thing too seriously.
Yeah.
We're here, I think, ostensibly to enjoy being here.
Yeah, that's dangerous too. If we just act on our enjoyments, sometimes there can be dangers in that, I think. Because I think the temporal realm starts to infect our mind. You know, if we're just in this short, quick fix, especially regarding what Master Shantideva's challenge of, if it's just for me, then then that's where suffering comes from. So,
well, isn't that why we do everything?
Yeah,
even
not
doing things for another. You know, ultimately we do it for me. Even if it's identifying the other as me.
Well, this is where I get into my question that I asked you the other day on Tuesday about the word yoga implies that there is another, like there's something, two things being yoked, and
yes.
and that sets up pre-designs a problem, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, I think what yoga is referring to is this buddhi yukta. It's being yoked to the buddhi rather than being carried off by the illusions of ahamkara and manas.
Yeah.
Actually, yoga is an incredibly selfish discipline, you know, because it's not about all beings. Ultimately, it's establishing kaivalya, which is aloneness. But you see, I think we in the West, we tend to have quite a negative view. It's kind of deeply ingrained in the West. We have a negative view about what our true natures are. That they're, you know, if we come to rest in who we really are, and we take away the shackles of all the disciplines, that we will be horrible, selfish beings and will go around killing each other. You know, whereas in the East, the belief is that who you are is God.
Well, that's fun.
If you start to take away all of the clothes and you end up in your own naked true self, you're God, or you're God-like.
Yeah.
And so there's that thing. Well, you know, people say, well, why don't I just go out and kill people then? You say, well, you wouldn't do that because that's not your nature. Your nature is truth, and your nature is love.
But it's a grasping onto that definition too. When we okay, I want to ask what. Speaking of discernment, let's talk about Viveka. So how do you see that as defined in the Yoga Sutras, or how do you see it defined in your life? As this
Viveka. I think essentially it's to know when you're out of line. It's to know when you're not in your integrity. It's to know you're being an idiot when you're being an idiot. And when you're bullshitting people, or I think that's essentially, it's having stepped out of one's center, I would say, is that ability. And, you know, it's like Jesus says, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. So it's not like you catch on to yourself being an idiot and then immediately go and do 100 sun salutations as penance. No, it's like, okay, there I go again. Oh, silly me. You know, it's like, then you love yourself for being an idiot.
Yeah, but at some point you just feel like, when is this going to stop? I have to start doing something about this, you know?
No, I would say look forward to it.
Yeah.
You know, you look forward to being an idiot again, because when it happens, it gives you the chance to remember again. And that's the beautiful thing about when one is being an idiot, and it happens all the time, is that you forget. You don't know. You can't be aware of how much of an idiot you're being when you're being an idiot.
Yeah.
You know, because otherwise you couldn't bear to look.
So sometimes, go ahead.
Please, John.
Oh, I was going to say, sometimes the opening chant makes me feel like an idiot. And so I really liked one time you were telling me about, you know, the opening chant and how you were describing it. And I recently read that you're doing, or you even said you're doing a lot more chanting these days, which is really nice. Do you think that, can you say a little bit about the opening chant and just maybe what your thoughts are on it, and or just chanting in general? You know, why should we chant as practitioners? Should we just do the physical practice?
I think no. I think that for the same reason that you do the physical practice, and you know, it's just because you enjoy it. You know, and I've always enjoyed like Indian philosophy, and I enjoy memorizing stuff, and I enjoy the sound of it. And also, like, I asked my teacher, it's like, why should I do this? Because, you know, I just like it. But he said mind cleansing. But so it's mind cleansing, and they also call it vakshuddhi, which is cleansing of the speech. So, you know, if you want to have beliefs about why you should do it, well, there's a couple of beliefs for you if you want to have them. You know, I enjoy it, and also it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to chant.
You still
I feel
opening mantra?
Yeah, I still do the opening mantra. So, one day I haven't forgotten it. Yeah, so the opening mantra I think is interesting because, well,
Yoga
you know,
Taravali, right?
The Yoga Taravali, right? And this is the funny thing about, you know, people in Ashtanga yoga is that they say it's the Ashtanga opening mantra. No, it's not. It's verses from, well, one's verses from the Yoga Taravali, and the other one people think was given by this guy Bhoja Raja in his commentary on the yoga, but it's not. It's by somebody else. It's much later.
Iyengar.
Maybe that one is Bhoja Raja.
I mean, Iyengar kind of reifies it, right?
Iyengar, yes.
Yeah.
See, this is what yoga schools do. They create mythologies about where their, you know, texts come from, and that's just what yoga traditions do. You know, they like, you know, it's like good PR. But you know, you shouldn't. If something actually works, if something works, you don't need to reify it, because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And actually, I find, like, chanting, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Right? You chant a little bit, and you feel good.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, the way I compare it is like when I was growing up, I used to be a big fan of the Smiths, and I knew all of it was like training for learning the Vedas, because I learned all of the lyrics off by heart. I can probably still remember them all, of all the albums. And then I was wondering, why am I depressed?
Right.
Because I've just been
Girlfriend's
absorbing
in
this,
her comb. No.
I've just been absorbing this misery for the formative years of my life. So now Vedic chanting is kind of like the antidote to what I did to myself when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I think, it is like spiritually aspirant. And all right, I'm not completely devoid of beliefs. I do think like there is some kind of maybe vibrational intention behind it. It's like if you're listening to like death metal, or you're listening to Enya,
Yeah.
it's going to make you feel different.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might prefer one over the other. You might prefer death metal. I don't know.
No, I totally agree. When I was younger, I used to think that I could, withstand and block all of those sort of minor keys, like that they didn't influence me that much. But now as I get older, I realize that I kind of have to like force feed myself some of the good music because otherwise I'll go into this dark hole. So it's like I'm kind of trying to stop myself lately from diving into that. I totally agree with you.
We're sensitive beings and more sensitive than perhaps we even realize. And maybe that is something that does happen with yoga, is that we become increasingly aware of our own sensitivity and I think what happens, perhaps, I don't know, is that we become more aligned with, we become more maybe vibrationally aligned with our own integrity.
Yeah.
Could be.
Someone asked, why do we do asanas first and then teachings? So why
What do you mean by teachings?
Well, I'm just quoting what they wrote, so I assume they mean like just more study, like swadhyaya in the kind of sense of just scripture. Why is it often presented first as in your mind? And this could be both, economically, or just it could be, based.
I don't know.
A lot of people base yoga on what they see at first. Like there's.
I would say that's probably more of a modern phenomena than a traditional phenomena. I would say back in the day, at the time of the Upanishads, well, no, you go and you do your inquiry. They probably didn't do much in the way of asana other than sitting. I think whatever your entry is a good entry. I mean, I don't think, like you go to different schools of yoga, the first thing that they do is they bring you into self-inquiry.
Yeah.
Philosophical self-inquiry.
Yeah, they may be getting at, I think, some even Buddhist schools, they tend to go more towards, the study first, like for a long time, 12 years or so long, and then some of the different Tibetan Buddhist schools will do asana or physical practices, whereas the Indian, philosophical viewpoints, and I think you're right. I think that we as Westerners put it in that just to market it like this.
I think because what we know is asana.
Right.
We think that whenever you go over to India, everybody's doing asana, and they're not. When you go over to India and you talk about the yoga postures, they think of those as just gymnastics.
Right. They're doing chanting morning with, their bells.
Exactly. Right. Primarily yoga asanas in the minority. Now that's changing a little bit as, now Indian middle classes are, it's like the pizza effect. Indian middle classes are doing it as a result of it having been popular in the West. But say you went to like a traditional, like Dayananda Saraswati was doing, any of those Advaita schools. No, it's philosophy.
Yeah. The philosophy
Anyway,
is
that would be my.
sometimes the I feel like the postures themselves can teach me. Do you think that's true? Like, just like if I'm really paying attention, if I let it do the work, sometimes I feel like it's, it can.
I wouldn't say that the postures teach me. What I would say is my intelligence teaches me if I have the opportunity to listen to it. That the teacher is here, and whether or not that teacher is able to listen to, say, the wisdom of another teacher, it's still the teacher in here that is able to do the listening. So I kind of think that, yeah, I mean, what I find the practice really useful for, as I was saying to you the other day, is it's like self-sufficiency. It's like, there you are in that moment. You're not on Facebook. You're not on Twitter. It's you, the body, and the breath. And, primarily when I do it, I'm alone. And in that moment, there's nothing else. And that's what feels really good, is knowing that space is always there. And for me, what I would describe it as is a space of support. And this is kind of the conclusion that I've come to. That's right. It's that the yoga asana is a support for, our deeper inquiry into who we are, and what the hell are we doing here in this dimension, and all of that. And that word in Sanskrit is pratishtha. And then I was reading one of the Upanishads, the Kena Upanishad, and it says exactly the same thing. It says, let me see if I can remember the tasyai tapo. I can't remember the exact verse, but you can find it there. Tasyai tapo dhamma karmyeti pratishtha. And that is what it's saying is that all of the practices and the self-control, the dhamma, and all of the actions, the karmas, they're pratishtha, they're support. A support for what? For that philosophical inquiry into the nature of who we are that's being presented in the Kena Upanishad. And which is a beautiful Upanishad as well, and there's quite a nice story in that one.
By whom do we sit?
Exactly. By whom? Who am I?
Yeah. I'm wondering, do you ever get scared? Like in the mornings. I was just thinking this morning, there's certain postures that bring up some fear. There's certain, and that there's places where my mind doesn't want to go. And that intersection is sometimes, for me, it's helpful to have an outer teacher there to kind of like, or several outer teachers, like that inner voice tends to not listen to itself. Do you ever find that you need that external encouragement?
I've always liked to, and I'll keep this in the past tense, I've always kind of liked to push myself and challenge myself. Not so much after 40, but definitely before, it was like, how far can I go? Just because there was kind of, I like intensity. And they're, going through some of those 3rd series postures, 4th series postures, there's an incredible degree of intensity in some of those. Yeah. Like Asana is just intense. Like, you've got to come out of it as soon as like the lights start to go out. It's like, okay, that's my 5 breaths. But I'll be honest with you, and I see no benefit in that whatsoever. No benefit. I am just somebody because of my nature, because of the way I was born, has a particular attraction to that kind of intensity.
But I think there, I'm asking because I think that we chose this particular form of yoga because we like that aspect of it. But I do think that people like some kind of intensity in whatever their venue is. Like if I'm a musician, then I want that intensity of that thing, that place where I'm a little bit scared and I'm pushing my edge, and I'm like, maybe I've never done this, but like touring 200 shows, and I'm like, I want to just like find out what that limit is, or whether I'm translating Buddhist texts, or whether I'm, a journalist, or, like I'm at that edge where I'm like really giving my all. And then for me, I find like doubt comes in sometimes. And then if there's like someone to just be like, you've still got more, or dig deeper, then sometimes it can be beneficial.
Well, fear is also healthy. It's a healthy response. There was something that just came to me there. Oh yes, because it's like extreme sports. When people are doing these extreme sports, what do they get? They get release from the mind. It's like people go, the mind is so strong and causes so much suffering that they need to do something extreme to bring them into the present moment. But talking about fear, there was something I was doing the other day, which was I was trying out for the first time free diving, and that where you go down and you hold your breath,
right?
And I was petrified. Because you're there, you're in the middle, you're in the water, and actually you're told that apparently in the water, you're not going to breathe in water. That would have been my fear, that you go and you breathe in a ton of water. Apparently that doesn't happen. Apparently you asphyxiate first and then you breathe in the water.
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say like Ganda Asana, sure, I'd have fear about that.
Yeah.
And do I need to go there? No.
Yeah. How much of your daily life is spent like in your day these days, but also in the past, as far as like a physical practice, but also like reading or meditating, or how much time do you, or pranayama or chanting, do you apportion your day?
I don't know. I kind of take it as I feel it as well. Like I'm definitely a little less rigid with myself about the actual physical practice, because I've had a lot of injuries, so-called injuries. You don't really have injuries so much. Well, maybe you do, but taking it a little bit easier, so I don't like push myself, like, because it was too much. If what I found was that if I went through all of what my practice was, I'm useless for the rest of the day. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, that's too much. But I do some pranayama at the moment. I go through phases of that. At the moment I do that, and then I do asana practice, and then I do chanting. And then also with the classes that I've been giving, I've been spending a lot of time also researching and then learning Sanskrit. And it's all good entertainment.
I feel like that's a interesting gauge that you pointed out just now, that if you feel washed out. So I think the last couple trips to Mysore, like I particularly feel like, oh my God, like I don't want to do anything with any, I don't want to go out. I don't want to like, I'll go and I'll grab Pete, but basically I want to just like, and for me, that's not thriving, So for me, like,
the last time I was, I would get back to the house after practice. I'd come out completely dehydrated, I would go for my record number of coconuts, and then I'd get back, and it would take like 20 minutes to get my trousers off. Because I was so wrecked. To get the trousers off to get back into bed again.
Yeah.
And there's a certain like high that goes along with it. You know, it's like you're kind of like touching the edge of your nervous system.
Yeah.
Which kind of feels in a way like a little bit exhilarating. But does that really have anything to do with yoga? And in my mind, not. You know what I mean? It's got, to my mind, like going to those edges of the nervous system have got nothing to do with abiding in my true nature.
Right, because I guess we'll find that when we're at our moment of death, we'll be on the edge, right? That'll be like the edge of our nervous system.
Right.
Okay, let's see here. Oh, let's talk about the student and teacher relationship, because I'm interested in a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So, do you feel it's important to have an outer teacher? Like, do you feel like it's important to have someone to help guide you along a path that you've chosen? We'll start there.
I think the word important is a strong word, John. Essentially, I don't think anything is important, you know. But if you want to play that game, you know, and if you want to learn something, probably the easiest way is to learn it from somebody who's learned it. Somebody who can, again, the word I would use is support. Somebody who can support you and just say, oh yeah, well, here's the way we do it. We do it like this. And I wouldn't say so much that it's important as it's really helpful, or it can be really helpful. And that's what a friend would do for you. You know, that's what friends do for each other. They support each other. So I would say, yeah, really helpful to have somebody's support in what you're doing. And also, as, you know, somebody who's learning something, to have that capacity to listen to somebody. And listening doesn't mean that you swallow it all, but just that you have that capacity to listen in two senses. Is that you listen to the so-called teacher, but you also listen to yourself. It's like that quote you said to me the other day about the Buddha, about when he said, yeah, you must, you know, scratch and boil down, and I can't remember the ins and outs.
Yeah, to get the gold. Yeah, you have to test it, you have to rub it, burn it.
You don't just take things because I say them, but you must analyze them, or you must take them on board. And that's essentially what I would say is that capacity to listen. And yeah, so I would say absolutely, teacher, really helpful.
All right.
In terms of learning that, you know? Yeah.
And this is go ahead.
In terms of learning yoga, on the other hand, I don't know.
I think there's this engagement, and what has become apparent to me, there's a saying in Tibetan Buddhism that you should keep your teacher 3 valleys away from you, you know. I think, like, when we get really close to someone and we find out that, you know, they also make a stink in the bathroom, or, you know, that they have their own problems, then that's a place where you know, our tendency is to want to box up and recoil, or you know, go back to our own Satguru, you know. And so I find often it's that place of uncomfortableness with the other where you, like you say, you have to listen. You have to like listen more, you know, in those places that, you know, someone points out to you that maybe you said something that hurt them or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, and that again is just what I would say. That's what friends do for each other. You know, you've some friends you'll listen to more than others.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Here's a good one. How should a practitioner adjust as they get older?
I would say, how should a practitioner adjust as they get older? It's just listen to one's body, listen to one's intelligence and one's integrity, you know, which is something which comes more easily with age, I believe. You know, when we're younger, we tend to just go gung-ho at it, full guns blazing, without really being aware, because then, you know, we can break our bodies and they'll heal again. But I think with age, just discernment comes. And I would say to anybody, you know, don't force yourself to do something that doesn't feel right for you. You take each day as it comes, and each moment as it comes, and each breath as it comes, and then you let your body and your mind reveal itself to you. Like today, I started practicing, and almost first sun salutation, pulled a muscle. And which is a real pain in the ass, because I've been having such good practices recently. But then, you know, pulled the muscle, and then it's like, fine, I'll see how I go for a little while. And then I finished early.
Yeah.
Because that was that's called body speaking. You know?
Mind listening.
Mind listening for once.
Okay. Well, that was really nice. I think we're going to open the chat room now. So whoever is in charge of that, looks like it might be Lindsay or Jin Young, might open the chat room, and we'll take some questions. While we're waiting, we can talk about music, which is always fun for me.
Sure.
Do you listen to music after practicing yoga? This is someone asked. This is kind of a fun question. Or do you just stay in the void without listening to any music?
I don't really listen to that much music anymore. I used to a lot. I go through phases where I'll kind of tune in with something. Like recently, where is Luke zooming from? Luke is zooming from Portugal. I've been enjoying a bit of classical music recently, and also Western classical music, Indian classical music. This looks like a good one.
Just wait, hold on, just stay with it. Let me go through these, Luke. I want to parse out some of them.
Oh, that's a good question. Qawwali, I like a bit of Qawwali at the moment.
What is Qawwali?
Qawwali is Islamic devotional music. So the kind of foremost Qawwali musician everybody knows him was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. The most incredible voice you've ever heard. It just blows you away.
I want you to send it to me.
I will. I'll send you. I've exactly one that I'll send to you. And the other thing that I've been kind of enjoying has been Psy ambient music.
Yeah. You can send me that too.
I will. There's a band I was listening to, and I was like, "Whoa, this is incredible!" There's a group called Ascendant.
Okay.
And I had it on the headphones, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! What they can do these days."
Someone asked if you'll ever go back to Mysore to practice yoga.
Yeah, I'm open to that for sure. I'm open to that.
Okay, you probably saw what Harmony asked.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't see all of it.
She's wondering, what are the implications you said people don't want to accept regarding to accepting that Samkhya is the underpinning philosophical system to the practices of yoga?
Well, Samkhya is clear. It's unequivocal in its declaration that there's no free will. And so people can't accept that. People don't want to accept that in terms with yoga, because yoga is supposedly all about you being the actor and being able to bring yourself to enlightenment. And Samkhya is saying, no, it's all just a happening. And no one was ever bound and nobody is ever released. It is always and only ever been the gunas acting upon the gunas. And there's a few parts where Krishna says the same thing.
Okay,
well.
I have to stop you. This is really problematic for me, because this is getting back to an uncaused thing. So, like, there could be a cause without an effect. You know, like that idea of that, like, initial, like, spinning, you know, or that
it's
primordial sound of Om, you know, is always there.
Like the Big Bang.
For me, I've never seen, and also with the laws of
the Big Bang is a cause without effect. Give us, as the great Terence McKenna said, give us one miracle and we'll explain everything.
Yeah, so I mean, I get the philosophical point of view, but it doesn't logically make sense. Doesn't hold for me, because it seems like there can be.
Well, I'm not
nothing can come from nowhere, because if there's a nothing to prove, then how could it always?
Well, you see, I'm not advocating it as a philosophical point of view. What I'm saying is that's what Samkhya says,
right?
And yoga, in being connected with Samkhya, which in my mind is also beyond a doubt, it must also accept, therefore, the conclusions that stem from the Samkhyan perspective. And I think it is a useful way to contemplate things. Because we are so certain that we are the doers of our own action, that to immediately call that belief into question, I think can have purpose, as it can be to call into question the belief that everything is determined. You know, so it's kind of that. Hold on, Harmony's going crazy here with these questions.
She's really enjoying. What about Ishvara? Harmony says, what about Ishvara as part of Samkhya, but introduced in yoga? Could not Ishvara be the practice or tool to insert a space where we could exercise our own volition?
What about Ishvara, though? As Ishvara,
she's asking about.
Well, you see, there's different Sankhyas. In the Samkhya of Ishvara Krishna, there's no Samkhya, but in other Sankhyas, it's said that there is Samkhya. So you've got also the Samkhya that's given by Bhishma in the Shanti Parva in the Bhagavad Gita is also Ishvara. So historically, there's a question about whether or not Ishvara has been part of Samkhya or not. In fact, people say that yoga is Samkhya with Ishvara, but the Ishvara that Patanjali is talking about, I find it hard to see how that could be shown to be a personal God like Krishna or Shiva. I know, like Edwin Bryant in his book, he's comes from he's Hare Krishna related, so he's trying to extrapolate Krishna as being what Patanjali is talking about, and I just don't see it. Ishvara is a special Purusha that has never been touched by the kleshas or action or any of these other things. So I think what the role of Ishvara is in yoga is as a...
the force. It's the Star Wars force.
well, as a tool for meditation, you know.
Someone asked, "What's?" We talked about moksha, you know.
Yeah.
But someone asked, "How do you define it? What personally? What do you define it? Is it something other than abiding in one's true nature?"
Well, I think we see there's a danger with all of these things, including the notion that you abide in your own true nature. I think there's a danger with them all that they set up a goal that is at some point in the future that you work your way towards, rather than being with yourself as you are now. And so moksha, you know, it's mukhyati, it's from the Sanskrit root mukh, which means release. So it's, you know, being unfettered spirit, I guess. Liberation, release. Release from what?
Yeah.
Samsara, release from samsara. You know, and so this is what Krishna's telling. He calls in one point he calls it Brahma Nirvana. But what is it released from? It's released from identification of yourself as the doer of your actions, and therefore there is no further accretion of karma, because karma results, both good and bad karma, as a result of identifying yourself as the doer of your actions, according to the philosophy as I understand it. You know, and that's why we stay in karma, is because we're thinking, I do this, I do that, and then we're attached to the results of those actions.
Right, and he says as much. He who thinks that I am the doer, you know, isn't seen.
Krishna is the doer in all. You know, the Prakriti is his body. And so actually Bhagavad Gita, to come back to Harmony's point, is the Bhagavad Gita is Samkhya with Ishvara. It's an Ishvara form of Samkhya, as far as I understand it. Krishna himself says that all of Prakriti is my body and Purusha is my consciousness. So it's all Krishna. So there you have a Vedantic kind of monism.
Yeah, but how do you parse out? This is one thing that drives me crazy about Samkhya. It's like they parse out, but then like there's places where obviously those meet, you know. So are they where you know, it's like you separate them, but then I never quite got that, because it's like seems like we understand that.
The Bhagavad Gita gives a nice answer, you know, which is, well, it's all Krishna. You know, so it's all joined at the top. But you're right. It's a tricky philosophical conundrum to imagine this. So the way I imagine it happens is, so you're identified in the body, mind, and world, and then the mind is turned back inwards, because the mind is the pivot point of the Samkhya system, and it begins to, you know, go inside. And it gets to the point where it has the high revelation of the buddhi, in which the buddhi realizes that it's not conscious, that its consciousness is a borrowed reflection of Purusha. And then because of that, it just kind of goes, oh, all right. And it lets go and lets everything happen just as it happens. That's kind of my imagining of like how the Samkhya works. But yeah, you're absolutely right. At no point in the system does it appear that Purusha and Prakriti have ever been joined. The Sanskrit term that's used is sannidhi, which is there has been a closeness. And so this is the metaphor of the dancing girl, right? They are there in...
That's in the Karika, right?
In the Karika, no, this isn't exactly how it goes in the Karika, but this is how I imagine it, is that she's not dancing yet, but she's kind of like an exhibitionist. As soon as Purusha comes near, it's like she knows she's being watched. and she begins to dance. You know, so that's the imagining, is that it's the closeness between Purusha and Prakriti that gives rise to the dance of Prakriti. And what does it say about how this? I mean, it's a beautiful philosophical argument. It says, when did this happen? Oh, it's timeless. It's gone on forever.
Yeah.
So they don't have an answer.
Yeah, that's always unsettling for us.
But it is a little bit
we
like
want to get things. Yeah.
It's a little bit like quantum physics, when quantum physics says, well, actually, it's the observation of the experiment that creates the experiment.
Right.
That creates the result in the experiment. So in the same way, Samkhya is basically saying the same thing. It's the observation of reality that's creating reality.
Yeah. This is a really good question. We'll probably end it on this one. Ellen asked, do you have any philosophical thoughts on the particular moment in time in the world's history in which we're enduring? So do you have any like philosophy over just thinking in terms of reflecting on what's going on right now and how it relates? Could spend like another half hour on that one.
There's a nice phrase that I heard, which is, I don't know, you've probably heard of her. It's Byron Katie, and she apparently, you don't know these things, but she apparently had an awakening, right? And she was just like a regular person, and people heard about her, and they started to come to her door, and all of these people who came to their door, they were spiritual people, and they all came to the door and they all said, namaste, namaste. And she thought to herself, they must be incredibly wise people, because they're all saying no mistake, no mistake. And so I think that's a kind of a helpful way to look at reality as it happens, is that for whatever reason anything's happening, there's no mistake. So you don't question what reality presents, and then you're left to deal with the consequences of what happened. You can't argue with what happens, you know? Good things happen, bad things happen, and hasn't that been the way it has always been? And in every happening, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for becoming more aware. You talked about Viveka. There's an opportunity for waking up. But not only in the bad things that happen, but also in the good things that happen. You know, to see where we get greedy for having only good in the world, when that's not how the world is. Or how we get greedy for having only good in ourselves, when that's not how we are.
Okay, well, we will. Thank you, Luke, for your insights, and I'll let Lindsay take it away.
Thank you so much, John and Luke, for sharing today, for your conversation and your insights. And thank you to all of you who joined us today. We're so pleased to have you here with us. And I want to remind everyone that we are encouraging donations to directrelief.org. So check them out and be part of a solution. And then finally, we also want to encourage you to check out the Contemplative Sciences Center website, support us if you can, so that we can continue to offer these kind of programs and conversations, and be well. Thank you.